Thank you everybody for joining today. Welcome. My name is Catherine Gleason. I am with Livable Streets Alliance, and we are also an organizing member of the Massachusetts Vision Zero Coalition, which has organized this webinar today. Just a few quick notes about webinar logistics. We've got a lot of great speakers today who will be talking a little bit more about previous events in Massachusetts, tips and tricks and resources for how to organize your own World Day of Remembrance event. I will get us into the webinar. Galen, you can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So just before we get into the specifics of hosting an event, I just want us to all start with kind of a shared understanding about who's, the Vision Zero Coalition and the work that we do, as well as generally what is Vision Zero. So Vision Zero is a framework for, preventing traffic fatalities with the goal of reducing these traffic crashes and severe injuries to zero in Massachusetts. And, many municipalities and cities in Massachusetts have, made Vision Zero commitments, but that's not to say that that all cities and towns have done that. And so if the town that you're coming from, hasn't made a Vision Zero commitment, that doesn't mean that there isn't any Vision Zero related work that's happening that you can engage and push on. So there is likely other safe streets specific work, that is ongoing that you would be able to engage in your city or your town. And then just a little bit about the coalition. We are a broad and growing statewide group of advocates and community groups and individuals across Massachusetts who are really focused on improving road safety in our state. And so, Galen, you can go to the next slide. Before we get into the specifics of how to host an event, I do want us to take a moment to just ground ourselves in why we're here and why we're talking about what we are. So far in 2023, 275 people have lost their lives on Massachusetts roadways. And this number does not begin to include the nearly 2,000 people who have been impacted by serious injury crashes and the countless loved ones, families, and friends who have also felt these impacts. So I want to just encourage everybody to take a quick pause to reflect on this number and reflect on what's been going on in your own community. Thank you so much. You can go to the next slide, Galen. Okay, so with that grounding and why we're here today, what is World Day of Remembrance? So it is an annual international day across the globe, remembering those who have been impacted by traffic violence. And it's a day that we can, come together and recommit ourselves to improving our roadways and honoring those that we've lost or who have been impacted. And it is every November on the third Sunday of November. So this year it's coming up on Sunday, November 19th. And even though it is a specific day, I would say don't let that limit you if you want to host an event on a different day or, have like a week-long campaign or something like that. Don't let, that it's a specific day discourage you from organizing something when it works best or when it makes the most sense for you. And of course, the why of why do we organize around World Day of Remembrance is really because we all know that traffic fatalities and serious injuries are preventable, and one death on our roads is too many. So, with that, I will pass it over to my colleague Galen, who will be talking a little bit more about events that have happened in Massachusetts and, you know, giving some inspiration for previous events.
Thanks, Catherine. Hi, I'm Galen Luke, Executive Director of the Massachusetts Bicycle Coalition. We do the statewide advocacy in Massachusetts. And so we do think on a state level, but I think what's important about World Day of Remembrance events is that they matter where you matter. And you can host at any level, at any strata that you find is impactful and affecting to you and your community. And so here are some examples of World Day of Remembrance events that we have helped co-host in the past on various levels. On a statewide, we do work with the Massachusetts Vision Zero Coalition. Catherine Local Streets, Emily with Safe Roads Alliance, and Brennan with Walk Massachusetts are here to represent some of the broader work. And on that level, we do host a kind of a memorial flower laying at the State House. We do want to have a single unifying visual that represents the statewide impact. And typically some of the statewide work happens on a legislative and policy work level. And so we are focusing some efforts. Specifically this year, we will be laying yellow carnations on the steps of the State House in an effort to have a visual signifier of the work that needs to be done on a legislative level. On a municipal level, a great example, which we'll hear from shortly from Betsy Johnson of the Walk Bike Springfield level, is in a advocate's stance of making a signifier that draws the policymakers from city council and a mayoral level to really focus on what's been happening, but with a pursuit being done from the advocate's perspective. This shot is of yellow shoes that have been painted to represent all of the fatal crashes in Springfield alone, and to represent some of not just the pedestrian crashes, but also those who have been lost in traffic crashes and cycling crashes, which is the purview of public officials to keep everybody safe. And it can be done from an advocate's perspective. This is on the steps of the Springfield Public Library, which was a high-profile site of some serious crashes last year. So it really had a very somber impact, and it was, again, advocate-led. On an official-led, Pittsfield is also a wonderful example out in the Berkshires of showing what can be done on a small city level, where local proclamations were sent out by the mayor. Local transportation departments were helpful in creating and co-authoring press releases that could be put in the local papers. And this is an example of lighting of a municipal building in yellow on World Day of Remembrance. So anybody passing by will have that extra recognition and extra notification that this is being taken very seriously at all levels of power. And again, this was kind of a lovely example of a top-down impact and a top-down influence to showcase that there is support for World Day of Remembrance. And World Day of Remembrance really, though we have a toolkit for resources and a suggestion of a how-to guide, there is no right or wrong way to honor those who have been killed or seriously injured on our roadways. We all are working towards the goal of eliminating the need to even have a Vision Zero. So one additional event I'd like to highlight was in New Bedford, where we just had a local advocate with her family go up to New Bedford City Hall, make a handmade sign with yellow carnations and place it there, take photos of it, send it to the local officials to acknowledge that this is the responsibility of those in power, policymakers, to really make sure that our public is safe. But this was just a single person and her children going about and making these statements. Coordinating with others, maybe you're part of an organization and maybe you're not. We want to make sure that you feel welcomed and encouraged to do whatever you feel is the meaningful steps to acknowledge a World Day of Remembrance. Now, how can you do it? There are some things that we might recommend. These are by no means musts, but these are suggestions. But we do think that one of the major impacts of hosting an event is that you get it in the media. This is where the Vision Zero Coalition can help out. We can broadcast an event. If you have it scheduled out a few weeks in advance, please let us know. We can help you craft a press release that we can help send to local papers. We can help put you in touch with local officials who you may not be connected with, or maybe you are connected with, and it's kind of expanding our networks. A couple of examples of what we have been able to do, as I mentioned prior, laying flowers, yellow carnations is kind of what we do as our go-to, but again, it's whatever makes you feel comfortable. Lighting a candle and just remembering those who have been lost. Taking a minute to pause is more of the meaningfulness of the humanity of what we're trying to seek out there. And we have a toolkit that has examples, which we are dropping in the chat, and I can confirm that I have changed the chat options so that you can engage in the chat. You can now chat as well, so feel free to utilize that as a communication tool as well. To talk a little bit more about the toolkit that we have in the chat, I'm going to pass it off to Emily Stein from the Safe Roads Alliance to take over from here.
Thanks, Galen. So part of the reason we're holding this webinar today is to share this toolkit that we've created for everybody across the state. The main focus is how you can bring this a World Day of Remembrance event to your own community. That's where so much action is happening around road safety. So the toolkit includes information about what's your overall goal. Are you trying to add a speed bump at a really, dangerous road where people tend to speed? Are you focusing on honoring somebody who was killed in your municipality? So it's thinking as a group or an organizer of an event, what's our goal? The toolkit helps you, recommend locations to think about, who to invite to help plan, who to invite to speak or attend the event if you do something in person. We include a press release, tips to reach out to media. And like Galen said, we're happy to help make connections there. And how to find the data. So I'll get into that in just a second, because we found so important to, you might have one high visibility crash in your town that you know of, but then when you look deeper into the data, you might find that your town might have, several other fatalities that might not have been covered in the news, as well as serious injuries. The toolkit also includes some helpful recommendations such as dress warmly. We've had, because this is in November, oftentimes if you have an outdoor event or gathering, it's cold. So yellow is the color of this day internationally. So yellow scarves, yellow hats, yellow gloves. Our mayor in Medford has a very bright and beautiful yellow winter jacket that she wears every year when she reads a proclamation. And lastly, we have in the toolkit is also social media tips for that, certain hashtags, as well as a sample proclamation. So if your town select person or mayor chooses to read a proclamation leading up to the World Day of Remembrance, there's sample language in there that can be shared with them. And yes, if we can, so I don't know what people on this webinar, if you're familiar with the Impact Crash portal. This has been an incredibly valuable tool for advocates, anybody who works in traffic safety. MassDOT created this, I want to say in 2018 or 19. So as you can see already, when we created the slideshow, when we reviewed it 2 days ago, the reported fatalities year to date was 273. And as Catherine said, we've already lost 2 more people. So that's essentially 1 a day. And already a total of 97,621 total crashes in our state. So there will be a link to this website in the chat. Basically what we usually recommend, or the tool that I use the most, is going to interactive data dashboard. So you click interact, That will bring you to the next screen where you press explore. And then if we can go to the next slide, you will be able to then choose statewide crashes and serious injuries or fatalities, year to date or total. And you can search by year. You can put in your town or city, and then you'll be able to, you can also look at gender, age, time of day, month that the crash occurred. But what's really helpful is seeing the locations where these crashes have been located. If it's a pedestrian, a cyclist, a motorist, a passenger, or a motorcyclist. And I know we've lost a lot of motorcyclists in the last year or two since the pandemic. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions. This tool is a whole webinar in itself, but this is a really great way to get the data. So you can use this in either reaching out to families, reaching out to DAs to find these families, and also just knowing what's going on in your community, what roads might need to be targeted for some infrastructure design changes. So I believe that's it. I'm going to pass it off to Betsy Johnson of Springfield, who will share how they organize really impactful events in Springfield.
Thank you. I'm the current convener of Walk Bike Springfield. And we're just a group of residents who have actually been meeting regularly and working to improve the safety of walking and bicycling in Springfield over the last 8 years. Our first project was to get the Complete Streets policy passed in Springfield. Oh, sorry. But because of the high number of pedestrian, of course, as soon as I start talking, I need water. I'm just going to go get some water.
Yeah, and I can chime in here a little bit. This is Brennan Carney from Walk, Massachusetts. So 2 years ago, Springfield had a number of high-profile fatal pedestrian crashes. And what you're seeing here is they organized an event on the steps of the library. Now that
Okay.
Betsy's back, I'll turn it back.
I'm sorry about that. Because I was saying, because of our high number of particularly pedestrian cyclist fatalities, we've been motivated to do a World Day of Remembrance event actually since 2018. That year in particular, we were highlighting a bicycle fatality. But 2021 was particularly deadly year, and we had not done an event in 2020 because of COVID. So the high profile fatality in 2021 was one of the employees at the of our central library was killed. Unfortunately, the parking lot for the library is across one of our major streets, State Street, and they the city wants people to basically do a 5-minute walk down a hill, use the signalized crosswalk, and then walk back up the hill. And needless to say, nobody does it. So this fatality was just within less than 6 years after a young child was also killed in this exact same location, but the city had done nothing despite lots of advocacy to figure out how to put a protected pedestrian crossing across there. So that year we actually had 38 between 2020 and 2021, we had 38 fatalities, including, I think, total of 8 pedestrian fatalities that we were highlighting. And so we went and collected lots of old shoes. I do recommend that and we painted them yellow. Do realize that spray paint doesn't work on athletic shoes. They just soak up the paint. So we ended up having to use regular paint. We used this, we got just as mentioned, we got the data for when the fatalities were taking place and who, and the nature of them, from the Massdat crash portal. And then we were able to get we combed the local press to see if we could get more details and if any case, any names. On some of the district, basically we asked the city to give us more detail. They withhold all fatality information. That becomes the purview of the local district attorney's office. And what we found is the district attorney's offices across the different counties all have different policies. Some will share the information. Ours, Hampden County, does not. So in terms of giving us the detailed information. So instead, what we did is, at least on each pair of shoes, one of our volunteers basically put the time, the day, and the type of crash fatality, whether it was a pedestrian, bicyclist, motorcyclist, passenger, operator, on each of the Cs. And so we read off that information and had different people in the audience come and accept those shoes. We did have the husband in 2021, the husband, since it was only within a month of when his wife had been killed, he was not ready to speak up. Last year he did, and he did some, but we did have other people who had worked with this library staff person say a few words about her. We did extensive outreach to local elected officials, the police, the local media. All three of those came and participated. And so we also did have flowers that we put outside. Being outside, we found candles didn't work. Unless you get the kind that are just little lights. And we did have a portable microphone that turned out to be very useful to use. In 2020, we partnered with the Holyoke Bike PED Committee and honored all of the fatalities in Hampden County because especially because there'd been a large number of pedestrian fatalities in Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke. And that way that also encouraged local media to really, particularly Channel 22 TV, as well as the local Republican Mass Live newspaper. We got very good coverage as a result of bringing it. So again, this year, we're doing it again with, honoring all of the victims in Hampden County, and are doing it again with the Bike PED Committee in Holyoke. Our program emphasizes the overall need to bring down roadway speed by a combination of, we emphasize the 3 E's: education, enforcement, and especially what's called engineering or redesigning our streets. So we're already in the midst of planning for November 17th again this year. So I turn it back to Judy, or I
Thank you, Betsy. I'll jump in real quick. Really appreciate your help here. I'll do a quick transition. And just for all of the details of finding out more about what Walk Bike Springfield is out, please check out our chat. We have some links in there for you so you can follow Betsy directly. And if you are in the Connecticut River Valley and want to participate or just want to check in, please, we encourage you to support. Great. Next up on our panel, we have Judy Proctor. She is mother of Charlie Proctor, who was involved in a fatal crash in Arlington in 2020, but is down in Connecticut, and can speak a little bit to her work happening locally. And I'll pass it off to you, Judy.
Okay. Yes. Sadly, I'm a loved one left behind. Charlie and his girlfriend partner were riding on Mass Ave in May 2020 and killed at the intersection of Appleton and Mass Ave. an intersection that actually had been slated to be changed because of the many injuries that had occurred there, but somehow fell between the cracks. So I'm grateful that we've been connected with Mass Bike and Galen and all, and they've worked together to change this intersection. And actually, for the first World Day of Remembrance, Galen asked us to speak, and we were still in shock and couldn't imagine doing that. Fast forward a year later, our son and daughter-in-law and myself have become involved in road safety advocacy. I live in Fairfield, Connecticut, town of 60,000, where we had 2 pedestrian fatalities and 14 injuries. I become friends with the head of our Bike Ped committee and recommended World Day of Remembrance. And she thought this was a wonderful way to honor those that had died and also to bring to the attention road safety that was needed in our town. And as a mother who's lost her child, the kind of support that this event brought to me was enormous. The other 2 folks families of the folks who had died, they also spoke. That's a picture of me speaking. And what was really heartwarming is how easily everybody in our town, our first selectmen, our police, and even in our state, our Senator Blumenthal, for instance, came to our event and he spoke movingly about someone on his staff, a cyclist who had died. So I encourage you all, that people want to make these changes, then they want to figure out how to make these changes, and the importance of clarifying actually who had died. In fact, in our town, it had not been reported. One of the deaths had not been reported because it happened at the entrance to the highway, which is a state road. And we ended up painting shoes red for those that had injuries and white for those who had died. And as much as possible, we actually named them with little placards that you can see there. And at the end of the event, we walked to the site where one pedestrian had died. And our first selectman vowed to, as well as our state rep, vowed to work on creating a crosswalk that hadn't been there previously. Let's see what else I can tell you. Well, I've since then approached some folks at our state level, and we're holding the first Day of Remembrance statewide up in Hartford on November 19th. And this will honor not only the probably around 300, we have higher statistics here, that have died this year, but also the 380 that died last year. And we're going to have a sea of white flags, probably 600, just for the visual, obviously a huge visual impact. We're going to be reading off a roll call of those pedestrians and cyclists who have died, and have a variety of speakers. not only those who've lost loved ones, and we've encouraged folks to bring pictures of their loved ones who've died if they're not comfortable speaking. And then, of course, various government officials and folks from our Vision Zero Council, which is made up of not only government officials, but citizen advocates. So however big or small your event is, it's definitely worthwhile. And yes, getting things out to the press, getting things out on social media, because people either don't know or they sort of don't want to know how many folks are dying on our roads. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So before we transition to the next part of our webinar, which is the Q&A, make sure to drop some questions in the Q&A feature or in the chat, and we will get to those. But before we do that, just want to quickly summarize some resources for organizing around World Day of Remembrance that we'll make sure are shared in the chat, as well as shared afterwards in the follow-up we do for this webinar. So as Emily talked about in detail, we have the toolkit that we created that has sample media advisories and proclamations in it, as well as generally event ideas. And it also, we are including a list of events and actions that are taking place in Massachusetts. So if you leave this webinar really inspired and organize your own event, please reach out to us and let us know. And we'll include that on our website in the toolkit, and we'll make sure that we also send that out to our networks and whatnot. So we'll make sure that we put contact information into the chat as well. And then a couple other resources I just wanted to highlight quickly. One is the National Vision Zero Network also has a World Day of Remembrance Organizers Toolkit that Jess just shared in the chat. And then to learn more about World Day of Remembrance in particular, there is a website dedicated to the day. So you can go there and learn more as well.